Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something huge. What happens when ADHD and puberty collide? And as you're about to see, the timing of that collision, well, it changes absolutely everything. So let's start with this massive question. Think about it. What happens when that hormonal tidal wave of puberty slams into a brain that's already working overtime just to manage ADHD? We're not talking about two separate issues. We're talking about a collision that creates two completely different realities for teenagers.
And the answer really just comes down to the brain's starting line. You take a brain that hits puberty around age 11, its prefrontal cortex, that's the rational part, is only about 65% of the way to being mature. Now compare that to a brain that starts this whole process at 15. It's had 4 more years to develop, putting it at around 80% maturity. That 15% gap, it might not sound like much, but trust me, it creates two vastly different journeys.
To really get what's going on with these two journeys, we have to look at the two powerful forces at play and understand why them coming together is such a big deal.
Okay, so force number 1 is the challenge of ADHD itself. At its very core, ADHD is a challenge with the brain's management system, what we call its executive functions. You can think of it like the CEO of your brain. It's in charge of focus, impulse control, planning, managing emotions, all the important stuff.
And here's the absolute kicker. In a brain with ADHD, that prefrontal cortex, the CEO, is already developing about 3 to 5 years behind its neurotypical peers. That is a massive developmental lag before puberty even enters the picture.
And then comes force number 2, puberty. This isn't just about bodies changing. It's a massive reorganization of the brain. The emotional, impulsive part of the brain, the limbic system, gets supercharged with hormones, while the rational, calm-down part, that prefrontal cortex, actually gets a little weaker for a while.
So, you see where this is going, right? When a brain that's already struggling with its CEO gets hit by a hormonal surge that also weakens that same CEO, the effects don't just add up. Nope, they multiply. This is what experts call a neurobiological perfect storm.
All right, so let's play this out. Let's look at our first scenario. What happens when this storm hits early, say around age 11? When that prefrontal cortex is the least prepared to handle it?
Well, when that emotional surge hits a really immature prefrontal cortex, the results are overwhelming. Emotional regulation just goes out the window. It often looks like nonstop anger or irritability. Impulse control? Gone. This can lead to a higher risk for early experimentation. Focus, especially at school, completely tanks. And any organizational systems that kind of worked before, they just crumble under the new pressure.
It's literally like throwing someone who can't swim into rough, choppy seas. The main struggle isn't about forgetting homework, it's about a fundamental inability to manage their emotions and behaviors. The kid feels totally out of control, and honestly, so does everyone around them.
Okay, now let's shift gears. Let's fast forward to our second timeline. What happens when puberty kicks in later, around age 15, in a brain that's had a little more time to get its sea legs?
In this case, the prefrontal cortex has had 4 extra years to mature, so you've got a more capable ship to weather the storm. But the challenge is, they get way more complex. Emotional swings are still there, but now they often turn inward, showing up as intense anxiety. Impulsive risks might be more calculated, but the stakes are much higher. We're talking cars, relationships, bigger life stuff. And a huge new challenge pops up. This painful, intense self-awareness of feeling different or behind their friends.
And this, right here, is such a crucial difference. The fight becomes less visible to the outside world. Instead of those external meltdowns, the teen is fighting this quiet, internal war with anxiety, self-consciousness, and shame. It's every bit as intense, but it's just so much harder for anyone else to see. So let's put these two paths right next to each other. The contrast is really striking, and it just hammers home why timing is the whole ballgame here. This table just lays it all out, doesn't it? For the early bloomer, the challenge is raw, external dysregulation. For the late bloomer, it's this internal performance anxiety. One explodes with anger, the other simmers with anxiety. And what's so fascinating is at age 11, the ADHD symptoms can get lost. They're often dismissed as just typical tween drama. But by 15, next to their peers, those same symptoms become crystal clear. Look, this isn't about saying one path is easier. Let's just get that straight. Both are incredibly difficult. The whole point is to recognize that they are different journeys, and that means they need completely different roadmaps for support. So,
what does that support actually look like in the real world? How do we give the right kind of help for each of these very different journeys?
For the early bloomer, the one whose internal CEO is just completely swamped, all the support needs to come from the outside. That means rock-solid, predictable routines. It means someone has to step in and be a co-regulator, helping them name and manage those giant feelings. And it means building scaffolding in their environment, like visual schedules and constant reminders to prop up a brain that's still very much under construction.
But for the late bloomer, the game totally changes. The focus has to shift inward. The support here is all about helping them fight that internal battle. It's about protecting their self-esteem at all costs, teaching them more advanced coping skills for anxiety, and empowering them to speak up for themselves at school. And maybe most importantly, constantly reassuring them that their brain's path isn't wrong, it's just different.
You see, understanding this fork in the road is the first and honestly the most critical step. It changes everything about how we view a kid's behavior and how we show up to help. Which leaves us with one final, really important question. If we know this storm is on the horizon, what can we be doing right now to build a stronger ship, no matter when that storm decides to hit?